What is up, everybody? Gosh, it feels like I have not done this in forever. A week flies by. Was in the Dominican Republic. Then we had Christmas. We're coming up on the new year. And we're in a weird time for 49ers, not only as fans, but as a content creator. What do you talk about? Because you're going to have the whole offseason to talk about the offseason. And it will come in steps, obviously. There's going to be free agency. There's going to be signing your own players. Who are you going to cut? Who are you going to keep? There's going to be, do you keep coaches and what have you? And we're going to break all of that down today. But also, we know we're going to have plenty of time for that in the offseason. But here we are coming up on a game that means also nothing. And then we have the 4 weeks or so for the NFL playoffs where we're used to the 49ers being competitive, trying to win a Super Bowl, and we're breaking down every game, doing behind enemy lines, and that's all gone. So this is new territory for me as a content creator as far as what this timeline looks like. So I'm just going to go based off of what I'm thinking at the time. And things will automatically happen as they do. But as a fan too, this is an interesting thing to talk about because I know a lot of people are really fed up with Kyle Shanahan and they want to fire him and all these other things. But man, it's been kind of nice making these runs, right? And here we are, first time in Kyle Shanahan's career where he's had a starting quarterback or had his starting quarterback essentially for the full season, and they didn't make the playoffs. And every other time they've made it to at least the NFC Championship. So it is an interesting time as a 49er fan. It's an interesting time as a content creator as well. We're just going to navigate this thing together. So we'll start with this show, and we will start after the intro. All right. Welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. And here we are, an off season, but also not really. It's still the regular season. Show of hands in the chat. Show of hands. You just put a little hand emoji up if you give a rip about this game. And I'm going to assume there's probably not very many hand emojis going up. Probably not very many hand emojis at all. I don't care that much. I mean, there are things to care about within this game, but also knowing Kyle and how he operates, a lot of those things aren't really going to matter. Like, we're not going to see all of a sudden probably Ricky Pearsall and Jacob Cowing getting a ton of burn and just a bunch of reps because they're going to continue to play Debo and they're going to continue to play Kittle. We're not going to see those guys develop in front of our eyes. They just got to get in where they fit in. And that's the way that Kyle runs things. Really, I mean, the game within the game is still similar to a team when you're already in the playoffs and you're just trying to get to the playoffs healthy. The Lions game within the game is that they want to stay healthy because they're trying to go win a Super Bowl. And the 49ers are trying to stay healthy, at least long term, where you don't want to have an injury to Brock Purdy. You don't want to have an injury to Fred Warner or George Kittle, something that can prolong and go into 2025 or ruin their offseason, their schedule to recover and get better. You don't want any of that. So there is the game within the game, which is like, can we just stay healthy? I mean, minor things for sure. You pull a hammy, minor ankle sprains, those things can happen, but you don't want anything serious to happen because that can then affect next year. Look at Dre Greenlaw's injury last year and how that really lasted this whole season outside of a game, basically. And it really wasn't even worth bringing him back. And then you have CMC's injury, which he started with the calf injury, but that turned into an Achilles, then it turned into both Achilles, and then he was here kind of this season, but not really. So you see how this thing can go. Those are the things that we should care about. Outside of that, I mean, winning, losing. I mean, do we really expect to beat the Detroit Lions? And even if they did, who cares, really? So I don't know. It's an interesting spot to be in. Dave says, "What's up, Jesse? Appreciate you greatly. Keep it up. Appreciate you, Dave." Ooh, remind me, Dave. I've got some personal news, some content personal news to bring up, and I will do that at the end if I remember. And then Dave says, "I kind of want to see the Lions destroy Lyle, just kind of." Well, it doesn't really matter if they do or not. You know, it's interesting because StreamYard here, which is the app that I use to stream, it it gave you some updates here, it gave me some updates to where I can kind of change the fonts around. And I liked the font when it was just my name. It's kind of girly now. I'm not digging this font so much. So let's see which ones we like. Ooh, that one's like a typewriter. There's about 4 of you guys in this chat that know what a typewriter is. Let's see. Well, that's just messy. You know what? Just for the sake of keeping it clean, we'll go back to the original font, but I'm going to mess with that because I do like that. I like a little customization. You know what I mean? Anyways, I hope all of you had a fantastic Christmas, Hanukkah. You don't celebrate anything. You just had a day off work, whatever. You know what I mean? Like that was just a time to be with your family and have a day off. Yeah, so for you guys, it doesn't change anything because that's all through YouTube. But for me and what it shows on the screen, I can change it. And then what you see on the screen when I pull a comment up as well. I don't know. I'll mess with it later. But I do want to talk about the San Francisco 49ers and some of the looming decisions that they have. And then I also want to talk about not only the looming decisions that they have, but some of the we talk about draft all the time and how the 49ers don't draft well. And I do think that's blown out of context a little bit just because I went through their draft all like round by round this last offseason, and the 49ers actually do a really good job outside of round 1, essentially, which I know that's when the most talented players are there. You miss round 1, that's what everybody's going to talk about. But they actually, compared to the rest of the league, draft relatively well. But one thing we haven't talked about is the 49ers and the decisions they've made when shelling out big money. Now, I'm not talking about you sign, I don't know, random rotational pass rusher Charles Omenihu, for example, Arden Key for a couple $1,000,000. I'm not talking about those decisions. I'm talking about the decisions to shell out big time money in big time years. They really haven't done a good job there, whether it's their own guys they're trying to keep or whether it's guys they're bringing in from other teams. They really haven't hit on most of those. And so let's just start there real quick. We'll talk about big pay mistakes that they've made. And then we'll talk about some of their wins because they've definitely had some wins as well. And then we've got a couple that kind of fall in the either or category. And you guys can help me decide what you think. But big time payday money. Since Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have been here, let's talk about a couple of the decisions that they've made that I just frankly don't think were good decisions. Okay. And this is a good one. I didn't even have Pierre Garcon on here. Okay. But I do have Jerick McKinnon. Jerick McKinnon signed a 4-year, $30 million deal. He played a whopping 16 games and had 4 starts. Now, $30 million now doesn't sound like a big deal, but even actually, that's still pretty decent money. But 4 years ago, it was big time money. They paid him to be like a legit running back. 4 years, 30 million, 16 games played, 4 starts. Okay. We've got Quan Alexander, 4-year, $54 million, 13 games and 13 starts. Now, this one kind of hurt my heart putting Quan Alexander here because I also think that Quan Alexander coming to the 49ers from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the time, he brought like this energy, this juice that the defense hadn't had. And if you remember, Fred Warner was very early in his career, and that was Dre Greenlaw's rookie year. And you, even to this day, in the Fred Warner leadership arc, he was very quiet. Quan brought that personality out of him, and I also think helped mold Dre Greenlaw. So I'll forever be grateful for Quan Alexander, even though the time was short. I do think he made a long-term impact on this team, but ultimately, him as an individual, 4 years, $54 million, 13 games, and 13 starts. That's not a good signing. That is not a good signing. But yeah, the Hot Boys. I mean, that doesn't, that was a pretty sweet time. We have Weston Richburg. Remember Weston Richburg? Kyle Shanahan, just a couple short years ago, said the center position is the heartbeat of my offense. And since then, Jake Brendell's been the starting center. But once upon a time, he did put in a big investment into a center, a 5-year, $47.5 million Weston Richburg, in which they got two years basically out of, and 28 starts. 28 starts is all they got out of him. And then D Ford, who can forget D Ford? You remember, not only did they pay big money for D Ford, but they traded assets for D Ford as well. 5-year, $85 million. They got a whole 18 games and 2 starts out of him. I think D Ford is still week to week. Remember how bizarre that whole situation was? For like a whole season, week to week. And every time they ask Kyle, it's like, yeah, he's doing good. Just could be anytime. It could be anytime D Ford will be back. And then he wasn't back. And then it lingered into the next season. Then all of a sudden he was retiring. It was just, that was super strange. And then the last major free agent signing that they made was, well, we call him Jerome Hargrove over here because Shannon Sharp came up with that name, but the rest of the world knows him as Javon Hargrave. 4-year, $81 million. He's played 19 games and 19 starts. I think we can all agree hasn't lived up to expectation, and we hope, I think most of us hope, that he's no longer on this roster going forward. So, Javon Hargrave hasn't lived up to expectation. Then there's their own guys, okay? Where they've got Deebo Samuel, came off of that stellar year, record-breaking year. Signed a 3-year, $75.5 million contract. I think we can all agree he probably hasn't lived up to that. Then they also, this last offseason, reworked that deal to kick the can down the road, essentially. And now, because of all of that, they've got to make a decision on him this offseason. We'll talk about that here in a bit. But I don't think the Deebo Samuel contract was worth it. You always want to pay players for what you think they're going to do, not for what they've done. And for Deebo, seems more like they've paid him for what he did versus what he's going to do or has done since he's been paid. This one might be controversial, but Nick Bosa. I know that people go both ways on this one, but 5-year, $170 million. What do you have? 10.5 sacks last year. Remember, he was defensive player of the year. This year, he's been injured for a big chunk of it. So far, I would say, don't feel great about signing one Nick Bosa. Christian McCaffrey. Now, trading for Christian McCaffrey was awesome. Keeping him on that original deal was fantastic. But this last offseason, they decided to make that money. Remember, he had no more fully guaranteed money on his deal. They decided to make the next 2 years essentially guaranteed at $38 million, including this year, where they got 4 games out of him, and he was a shell of himself outside of a quarter against Buffalo. Not a great signing. And Trent Williams, same thing. I think the original deal, and this is what's interesting, because I'm going to put Trent Williams in both categories, because next I'm going to do the wins that they've had. And Trent Williams' original deal falls under that category. But this latest deal, where, again, he had no guaranteed money left on that contract, and then they made it guaranteed, much like they did with Christian McCaffrey, 3 years, 82.6 million. Didn't have the whole offseason. 36 years old. And he already, every season for like the last 5 seasons, he's missed at least 2 games. And this year, it's been even more. Now, obviously, he had the tragedy and everything. And I know that that's playing into it. But 36 years old, you already miss multiple games a year. It stands to reason that that's going to continue and potentially get worse as this thing goes along. So I don't think that was a great contract. And then let's get into some of the wins, though, because like I said, the original Trent Williams deal was a good one. It was a 6-year, $138 million deal. And as we saw after just a few years, all the guaranteed money was gone. Where they made the mistake was doubling down this offseason. But that original deal was actually a pretty damn good deal. So I put that in the good category. Richard Sherman. Remember Richard Sherman coming off the Achilles? 3-year, $27.1 million. I mean, not only was he good, but talk about a culture changer. I mean, this was a team that was trying to find its way, trying to become a winning franchise. And Richard Sherman certainly brought that. I mean, a lot of young, talented players on the 49ers, I think, can thank Richard Sherman for being in this locker room for the few years that he was, because I think he made a major impact on their careers and turned a lot of those guys into leaders, or helped turn them into leaders. So definitely worth that deal for sure. Charvarius Ward, I think, has been a great signing as well. 3-year, $40.5 million. I remember originally I was not a fan of this signing, just because some of the other corners that were better the year prior got less money or around the same money. I was like, God, I don't know, Charvarius Ward. But 3-year, $40.5 million. This year, yeah, a little bit of a down year, but we know why. He's absolutely lived up to expectations. So I love the Charvarius Ward signing. I think that was a good one. And now let's talk about a couple guys that are in house. Fred Warner, 5-year, $95.2 million. I think we all agree. And remember, just like a couple days later, Leonard from the Colts signed a bigger deal. So he went from the highest paid linebacker to a couple days later not being the highest paid. And we know what's happened to Leonard since then. I mean, he's basically out of the league at this point. Fred Warner has been a staple of this defense. I think he's earned every single dime on this team. And yeah, good one. Actually, yeah. I don't know about that one. Somebody brought up Armstead. Letting him go, I think, was a bad idea, but I also think the original contract was kind of overpaid. I don't know. That one's tough. I can go either way on that one. I did have it in the either way category. But yeah, Fred Warner, I think, has absolutely lived up to expectations. And then George Kittle, 5-year, $75 million. I mean, golly, he's still playing at an elite level. Phenomenal player. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. The best tight end in 49ers history. And, that's with guys like Brent Jones and Vernon Davis, what have you. So, yeah, I think George Kittle's been worth it. But you can see we had a list of mistakes and then a list of wins. I would say their bigger mistake is when they've missed on drafting guys. They've tried to double down in free agency, and they've missed on that as well. So you think about it, you've got, why was Quan Alexander here? What was the original mistake? Anybody remember? What was the original mistake? That first draft with the 49ers, what was the original mistake? There you go. Foster. Foster was the original mistake. So they brought in Foster. They drafted him. He was a mistake. They doubled down Quan Alexander. We saw how that played out. Javon Hargrave. What was the original mistake with Javon Hargrave? Why was Javon Hargrave a 49er? It's because they got rid of Buckner, right? They got rid of Buckner. They drafted Kinlaw. Domino effect. Get rid of Buckner. Mistake number 1. Mistake number 2 is drafting Kinlaw. Mistake number 3 was signing Javon Hargrave to a gigantic deal, and none of them were successful. Not a single one of them. And then some of the other ones weren't necessarily to cover up mistakes. Although I will say Jerick McKinnon possibly was there because Joe Williams was like the original sin at running back. Remember, Kyle Shanahan just had to have Joe Williams. Well, that didn't work out. And then Jerick McKinnon got a big time payday. And, well, there you go. So that's the way that it works. And yeah, I mean, maybe he was the right pick at that time for sure. I'm not saying that it wasn't graded out well. He was a good prospect, but it didn't work out. So when it didn't work out, you have to make up for it. And they did that in free agency, and then that didn't work out. I think Quan Alexander, when they signed him, we were all excited about. Who wasn't excited about Quan Alexander? I would say most people probably were excited about Quan Alexander when he signed, and Javon Hargrave. But they just didn't work out. And then the ones that could go either way, Eric Armstead certainly could go either way. I had a bigger issue not with the original deal, which I don't have in front of me, but when they reworked his contract before last season, and then they ended up cutting him a year later. Now he's on the books for this year to not play for him and next year. That's where I have the issue. So that's why it's either way for me. And then Brandon Ayuk, this one's in the either way category. I think most of you are going to say, hey, you got to put him in the not good contracts. The reason I say either way is because technically his contract has not even kicked in. It's still the old contract. So this year was the final year of his deal. Next year is when that contract kicks in. I think we'll know in a year or two for sure whether it was good or bad. Right now, it doesn't look like it's going to be good because of the injury and what have you. And he wasn't playing good football up to that point. But we certainly have seen the impact of not having Brandon Ayuk on this team for Brock Purdy and some of the other receivers as far as separation goes. So I've got it in the either way category. And then I think Jimmy Garoppolo, I got him in the either way. I mean, you can make an argument. Obviously, he's the highest paid quarterback, and then he got injured right away, and that was so stupid. But we got to remember this was a team that had not yet found a way to win. He came in for those 5 games. They won the 5 games. Then they did end up going to a Super Bowl and another NFC championship with him at the helm. They had an out after a couple years into that deal. It was structured very nicely. So I have Jimmy Garoppolo in the either way. I could see why you would say one way or another, whether or not, Jimmy Garoppolo was a good signing or a not so good signing. So for me, I've got him in the either way. I think you can make an argument both ways, but I think we can all agree, for the most part, anyways, that the big payday signings that didn't go so well, and then the ones that did go well. So all day, every day, Kim says Quan Alexander and Fred talked about his importance. Yeah, and that's why for me it was really, really hard, because I think we all know the impact that Quan Alexander had on Fred Warner and his development into a leader, and then Dre Greenlaw as a rookie. I mean, it was massive. And so again, it hurts me to put him in the mistake category, because ultimately 4 years, 54 million, he only played 13 games. And he was gone after a season and a half, essentially. You can't put that in the win category. I guess there were long-term effects as far as his leadership goes. Maybe you can put it in the either or, but that one's tough. That one's tough. Yeah, that's what most of, like, all these like custom ones that I have, that's what they are. They're all City Lokes. I love them. These neoprene ones are super dope, though. Super, super comfortable. So Dave says, Buckner, best guy, staple player for the Colts. Crazy. Yeah, it is crazy when you think about it, because the reason that they didn't keep Buckner, and I mean, honestly, what they got for him and the money they freed up, I can't say that the trade itself was bad, but it was everything that kind of followed that trade that ended up making that bad. But they get that. Well, I think it was like the 9th pick overall, whatever it ended up being. They trade Buckner. They bring in Kinlaw. They bring in Hargrave because Kinlaw's not good. But a big part of that was they were essentially choosing, okay, we can get Armstead and Ward for the price of Buckner. So it's like we get to keep Armstead and Ward, and we get to get some assets for Buckner. Kind of a no-brainer. Okay, whatever. That being said, Buckner, assuming he plays for the Colts next year, and assuming Hargrave does not play for the 49ers, he outlasted Kinlaw, Ward, Armstead, and Hargrave. And they're still trying to figure it out. And yet there's Buckner still trucking along, having great season after great season for the Colts. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, not great. Not great at all. All right. Let's talk about some of the decisions that the 49ers have this offseason. And the one that you guys know for sure, the big one, right? Brock Purdy contract. We've talked about it ad nauseum. We're going to continue to talk about it in some sort of capacity, but not on today's show. I do have to put it at the top of the list because it is like the biggest decision that they have. Not only like, are they going to pay him? Are they not? That's not really the decision at this point. I mean, to me, I've made my point clear, but Brock Purdy is most likely going to get paid. It's just, what are the terms of that contract? And so we'll wait. We'll see what the terms are. You're going to hear a massive number and a massive amount of years and all these other things. Ultimately, we're going to have to wait until all the details come out before we make a decision, which you're going to hear the contract break, and then it'll be about 24, 48 hours later, we'll get the actual details of that contract, and then we'll really be able to discuss it. Okay. So, but that is the biggest offseason decision, no doubt about it. But then after that, they have their own free agents. And they've got some big names on here, some big names, and then some interesting names that I've got here at the end. So, Dre Greenlaw, what do you do with him? They made the right decision, I believe, in shutting him down for the season. I do think that was the right decision. And I've got a text to Grant. My guy Marco noticed this, and then I couldn't unnotice it afterwards. But when Dre Greenlaw took the field against the Rams on that Thursday night football game, his first game back, it was very, very clear that the side that he had the surgery on, I believe it was the left side, the calf on that side was so much smaller than the non-surgically repaired Achilles side. I mean, it was crazy the size difference. So you're looking at that going, okay, I mean, that's not the end of the world. That takes time to build up. You give him this whole offseason, he'll probably be pretty close to back to normal. But you can see, like, okay, clearly there's a big strength shift right now from where he used to be and where that right side is at. A massive, massive difference. And then, no surprise, he's got calf issues. I've got to imagine it's that same calf because it's taking on a load from the rest of his body that it just can't handle. I mean, it's crazy. Go back and if you can find any footage from pregame workout, which I'm sure you can, go to somebody's Twitter. Some of the writers that cover the 49ers, just go back to their Twitter and the videos of Dre Greenlaw. They've got him working out, doing ladder drills. I think Grant actually might have a video on his YouTube of him doing this. It is so crystal clear. So the question becomes, what is he going to demand in free agency? Now, you got to remember the 49ers did a smart thing. It was after that Bears game, a game in which he had some boneheaded mistakes a couple years ago, where they re-signed Dre Greenlaw and got him for a steal, because you look at the rest of that season and, oh my gosh, Dre Greenlaw, they got him for a steal, absolute steal. So now he's coming off this injury. They can probably get some sort of discount on him, but he's not going to be, I wouldn't imagine, near as cheap as he was. I mean, he came off the street in a playoff situation for the San Francisco 49ers And yes, he wasn't able to make it through the whole game because they just pedal to the metal, didn't take him off the field, which was dumb. But immediately, you saw this defense go from damn near worthless at times to, oh my gosh, he's that damn good. He's that much of a difference maker. So what is another team that has all the money in the world? Are they willing to quote unquote overpay for Dre Greenlaw and say, hey, yeah, he's got this injury thing, but we believe we'll do all of our physical tests on him. We think he's going to be good to go. We'll give him that 4-year whatever deal, and we'll do it without hesitation. The 49ers are going, well, shoot. I mean, we would like to keep him here long term, but we got a lot of tough decisions to make. So we can't really give him that 4-year deal at X amount of dollars like you can. We just kind of have to let him walk. Like, is that a possibility? I definitely could see that being a possibility. And he means so much to this team, but you can't sign everybody all the time. You just can't do it. So what are the 49ers going to do with Dre Greenlaw? That's a huge, huge decision that they've got to make this offseason. Talanoa Hufanga, very, very similar. I mean, gosh, man, Talanoa Hufanga goes down last year. Jair Brown comes in, plays pretty damn good football. Had an interception, like his first half game on the field against the Bucks in the end zone, and looked to be ascending. This year seems like he's regressed. So you went from thinking, okay, Hufanga's going to be a free agent. He's been injured. You've got Brown right here, who's a really good player. You draft Mustafa, who looks like he's going to be a good player. There we go. We've reset the clock as far as price goes on our safeties. We're good. You bring in a couple veteran minimum free agents. That's how you fill out the rest of the roster. We love you, Huff, but you got to go. Well, Brown completely fell off and hasn't been very good. So then what? Hufanga comes in. He looks amazing, even with a club on his hand. Another tough decision. Jordan Mason, restricted free agent. They've got a couple decisions to make with Jordan Mason. What do you tender him? What do you tender him with? Do you tender him with, I don't know, what was the original round he was drafted in? 5th round, 7th, well, I forget. Do you tender him with a late round pick, or do you tender him with an early round pick? If you tender him with an early round pick, you're guaranteeing you're paying him like $6 million. Well, they can't do that. Actually, I think if you tender him with a second round pick, it's like $4 million. They can't pay him $4 million and CMC $19 million or whatever. No way. So he's likely going to test free agency. He's likely going to sign a deal somewhere else, and the 49ers are going to have to decide whether they want to match that or not. I got to imagine it's going to be tough to match. So Jordan Mason, another tough decision. And then we got 2 more decisions that if you had asked any of us at the beginning of the season, it'd be like, that'll be easy. We're going to get to the end of the season, and these 2 players, there is no decision. What are we talking about? Oh, he was. Was he undrafted? Okay, that's what I thought. So there you go. Jordan Mason undrafted. What round tender do you put on him? That's or at all. Do you match? I mean, there's so many decisions to make there. Anyways, the 2 guys that I'm going to bring up, Ben Barch, Jalen Moore. I mean, we've seen Jalen Moore play football for this team at tackle, and it hasn't looked great for the most part. You remember the 49ers drafted him. When they drafted him, they said that the plan was to play him at guard. They never did that. He ended up playing tackle, and it didn't look good for the most part until this year when it actually looked pretty decent. Now, I'm not saying like he's your left tackle of the future, but gosh, you always need a swing tackle that you can rely on. Jalen Moore is probably that guy, right? Do you bring him back? And then Ben Barch, out of nowhere, gets elevated, plays a little over a game. But he looked good. I mean, Banks is almost assuredly gone. So if he's gone, I mean, you could do the Burford thing, and I guess Burford technically could play tackle as well. I don't know. There's just some decisions that they're going to have to make, decisions that we didn't necessarily see coming when the season started. So Mateo says, for these contracts, are you looking at the actual amount that was paid to each player? Quan, 4-year, $54 million, but how much did we actually pay per game? No, I was just giving you the overall deal. I didn't dig into every little detail, but I mean, come on. 4-year, $54 million, and he's gone after a season and a half. Not ideal. Not ideal. John B says, in your opinion, Jesse, what should the 49ers offer Brock with the new contract? What do you think the annual and guaranteed should be? How many years? I mean, the 49ers kind of traditionally do the same thing. If you look at most of their contracts, there's usually an out after 2 years. So I would expect that they have that out going forward with Brock Purdy after 2 years. Now, remember, 2025 is not going to be a part of the new deal. It'll help because they can push some of that money into 2025, or at least as they spread out that signing bonus. But the 2 years would be after 2027. So you've got the end of his rookie deal in 2025. Then you got the first years of the new deal in 26 and 27. Hopefully they've got an out there after the 2 years. Not that they will use it, but if you have to exercise it, it would be nice to have it. So that's really, I think that's the most important thing. And then after that, you know, AAVs, whatever. They AAV, they could pay him $100 million for all I care. But if it's broken down like, okay, well, the first 2 years, he's got a cap hit in 2026 of 21 million, and then in 2027 of 33 million, and then they have an out. And if they cut him, you know, they'll take a cap hit of 39 million or something like that, or 32 million. I don't know, something lower. Then I can live with that. So that's what I'd be looking at. Do they have an out after 2 years? And then what do those first 2 years look like? And what does it look like if the out is built in? There's going to be an out. There always is. I just don't know when it's going to be. William Bennett says, Ja Brown lose with, hold on. We need a DB coach. Oh, okay. You're basically saying like Wilkes. I mean, yeah, Wilkes was a DB coach. Wilkes was a difference maker for the secondary. But, you know, at the same time, Renardo Green, I mean, shoot, he's developed nicely. He was a good player, though. And then he says, I don't want Kyle's. I'd want Kyle to look at the backups and not go O-line. I don't want Kyle. Brother, I don't know what you're trying to say there. I'm so sorry. Put it in the chat. Like, type it out. I know you're limited on characters. Just type it in the chat, and then I'll reread it. Then I'll just read it from there. Sub Skeezy says, I would let Brock play out his last year for one more assessment. Listen, I'm with you. That is exactly what I would do too. But they're not going to do that. And so what is the best way they can minimize this contract? Well, you have an out after 2 years, and the money in the first 2 years on the salary cap is not gigantic. And then the cap hit isn't one that you can't overcome if you end up moving on from them. That's how they're going to have to do it. But they're going to pay Brock this offseason. I would be shocked, absolutely shocked if they don't. But I believe they're going to. Man, a lot of people love Arch Manning. And listen, I love that he's got the Manning name. But he's not even playing over Quinn Ewers. Are we sure he's going to be great? I don't know about that. I mean, it's not like he's Eli or Peyton's son. He's like the obscure Manning brothers son, the wide receiver, right? So I don't know. William said, Jesse, I don't want Kyle to look at the O-line backups and not go O-line. Yeah. Okay. I mean, they need to get better at O-line, yes. They need to draft like legit offensive linemen. But like Barch and Jalen Moore, every O-line gets it. I mean, for the most part, almost every O-line gets injured at some point. And if you lose a player and you don't have a good backup, that's why I think Ben Barch and Jalen Moore are good guys to talk about, because they certainly can fit that mold and come in and play good. So for me, I'm not looking at them as like the replacement left tackle, left guard necessarily. They need to get young there and they need to get legit players. But coming off your bench, if those are your guys, I mean, I'll take it. I'll take it. Gregorius Craig says, but Jesse, you used to say that QBs, you give them 3 years. I didn't used to say that. I still say that, to evaluate the player, and then you make a decision. So what's your assessment, in or out? It's 3 full years playing. And that's why I'm saying, like, Brock Purdy has the 2 years plus partially that rookie year. At this point, like, I want to see another year before I feel good. I I think it's pretty clear that Brock's not an elite quarterback, though. Like, after 3 seasons in the league and 2.5-ish playing, like, that's enough of an assessment to say, I don't think he's elite. Now, clearly, everybody has. It's interesting because elite is so subjective. Like, your definition of elite or your definition of franchise quarterback versus my definition be completely different things. So, like, I may say, hey, Brock's not a franchise quarterback. And you're pissed off because you're like, yes, he is. But your definition of franchise quarterback also puts guys like Dak Prescott, Jared Goff, Kirk Cousins when he was younger. I don't know, guys like that. Tua puts guys like that have put some good years on the books. And you say, well, that's a franchise quarterback. Like, that's a guy you should pay. You can win with if the price is right. He's on your team. You developed him. Like, everybody has a different definition. But my definition is, if you're not elite, you're not a franchise quarterback, because paying guys that are good, which Brock Purdy is a good player, but paying guys that are good, elite money is how you put your franchise in purgatory. I mean, that's the facts. That's all we've seen in the salary cap era. That's the easiest way to not win a Super Bowl. If you've got a quarterback that's inexpensive like Brock is now, you have a chance to win. Russell Wilson was a great example of this. Russell Wilson's a good quarterback. Very good quarterback at times. Brock Purdy, good quarterback. Has been very good at times. But Russell Wilson was never elite. And when Russell Wilson was inexpensive, man, oh man, they won that Super Bowl. They got to another one. The moment that they paid him, they had to start stripping guys away from the roster. The Legion of Boom aged a little bit, which is similar to what we're seeing with the 49ers and some of their players. He was still magic at times, and he could make things shake. I mean, he was a thorn in the 49ers side for year after year after year. But he's not elite. He was never elite. And so because of that, you were never going to win a Super Bowl once you paid him big time money, because you didn't have the advantage of quarterback when you went up against the truly elite guys. And that's what Brock Purdy is. That's what Kirk Cousins is. That's what Dak Prescott is. That's what Jared Goff is, and Kyler Murray, and some of the, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of these guys. Tua, good players. They're not elite. And if you're paying your guy to be elite, and then when he faces elite quarterbacks and he just doesn't have the skill set to go head to head with that guy, you're toast. So that's my assessment after 3 years in the league and 2.5 years played. Um, I'd like to see another full year, but I do think it's pretty clear that he's not ever going to be elite. But he is a good player. Now, how good is he? That's where the hard part is. Is like, okay, is he last year good or is he this year good? Because if he's this year good, you can't pay that guy at all. You got to move on. If he's last year good, it's like, okay, you can pay him. You got to keep it reasonable. And if something better happens to come along, you keep your options open. So there you go. All right, got that one. Okay, let's talk about. Okay, let's talk about some of the cut and trade options. Deebo Samuel, option number 1, cut and trade. This is the decision they're going to have to make this offseason because Deebo Samuel, he's going to be at a big cap number this year. A lot of people are talking about, well, you might just have to extend him so you can push that money back. And it's like, no, please don't do that. Please don't do that. I have a feeling the 49ers might do that, but please don't do that. Like they're showcasing him or showcased him last week. And I love that he came out and he looked like old Deebo for a game. But if you're back to being Deebo, you can't do that for a game. You got to put game after game after game together. Let's see if he can go on a 3-game streak here to end the season where he looks really, really good. Like I would feel better about him being on the team next year if that was the case. But the question is are the 49ers almost trying to force this to happen? Or are they trying to force it to happen because they want to prove that he's worth keeping and paying again? Or are they trying to sell him to the rest of the league? Or is it just happening by happenstance? That's a possibility as well. Like it's just within the flow of the game. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but if the season ended today, it's like you got to find a way to most likely cut Deebo because I don't know that anybody's going to want to pay that kind of money for him. But if you can get lucky and you can get something for him, I would do that. We'll see what the 49ers do. Javon Hargrave, they reworked his deal. The thought was they were going to cut him. Now, Kyle obviously came out and was like, oh, no, we plan on him being a part of the team next year. I mean, as far as I know, I mean, I'm just, I'm here in the dark over here, but that was just some pushing some papers over there, just trying to figure out Javon Hargrave. It's like, no, there's a plan. Hopefully the plan is you move on from him. It just hasn't worked out. And now he's coming off of a major injury and he's on the wrong side of 30. Hopefully Hargrave, gone. Kyle Juszczyk. He took the pay cut this year. He's like 33 years old, 32, whatever it is. I don't know what he does anymore. I don't know what he does. And if you remember, he was one of the original signings for Kyle Shanahan. And I think up until really, I think this last offseason was the first time where I'm like, all right, it's time to move on from Kyle Juszczyk. You gotta move on from him. I've liked having him around up to that point for the most part because he did help kind of bring in a culture and he was an integral part. I mean, the original 49ers team with Kyle Shanahan was built to stress out linebackers essentially. Like how can you play a horizontal game and how can you stress out linebackers as much as possible? And Kyle Juszczyk was a massive part of that. But he's gotten older and his blocking has gotten worse. And he's not so much a part of the pass game anymore. He's just a body that's taking up space. and he makes too much money to do it. So it's time to move on from Kyle Juszczyk as well. But will Kyle actually move on from Juice? I don't know. I don't know if he has it in him. And then Jake Moody's the other one. Man, they got to make a decision on Jake Moody as well. They've got to make a decision on Jake Moody. I know that Kyle said some really, really nice things about Jake. Sounds like he's probably going to keep him around. I mean, you spent a 3rd round pick on him. That's pretty hard to just move on from. But you did it with a couple other running backs that never panned out. Jake Moody, yeah, the very, very least, you got to bring in a competent kicker to compete with him, like legitimately compete, not just a camp body. He's here for a couple of days. If Jake Moody pulls a hamstring or something, then he's here for a week, like an actual legit kicker to compete. And you can do that multiple different ways. You can bring in a big time, not a big time, but like a well-known vet. But there's always going to be a ton of free agent kickers that didn't get drafted. Go bring in one of those guys and have him seriously compete with Moody. Because Moody has just not been good. He hasn't. And we can say it's the ankle sprain, what have you, but there's also the stat floating around that he's like 15 of 15 in field goals at home or something like that, and then has missed all of his field goals on the road. Like, oh, so his ankle only hurts in road games? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So I don't think it's the ankle. I think that Jake Moody just hasn't been good. And I didn't like the pick from jump, and I certainly don't like it now after a couple years. So those are decisions that have to be made. I have a feeling Debo, Hargrave, Juice, Moody, that probably 3 of those guys are back. Not what I would do, but there you go. Tommy says, ooh, Tommy Huxley has some competition. This is the only other Tommy that I've ever seen. Tommy says, did you see Cam Newton's take on Purdy? I did. Saying the market dictates paying him top dollar, not whether he's the best, but if we don't, there's not a decent quarterback. I did see his take. and I think his take's the right one from the standpoint of, like, he also said that he's like, I wouldn't pay him to be a franchise quarterback. He's not that guy, which is where I'm at. But that's from like the 49ers franchise side of the house, which is what I care about most, is like, how does this team win long term? And I don't think shelling out a bunch of money to a guy that's not elite is the way to do so. And he agrees with that. But then on the flip side, get your money. Like, I don't fault Brock and his agent for trying to get all the money in the world. That's exactly what you should do. And Brock, you've been criminally underpaid. Criminally underpaid to this point. I hope you get the bag. And every player around the league hopes he gets the bag too, because that means that they'll also get the bag. So it's like, he's got this thing to uphold. He can't just give a massive discount, because if he does that, the players union and the players around the league are going to be pissed. He'll ostracize himself. He has to ask for big time money. Like, that's just the way the league works. So Cam's exactly right. He's exactly right. William says, imagine the secondary and a DB coach. Wow. With a good DB coach? Yeah. Well, listen. I don't know if those guys are growing on trees, but secondary has been pretty good. Willie says, what about trading a late pick for Chicago's backup quarterback? I don't know, man. I don't know. I've actually got a friend of mine is good friends with him. He got field passes to a couple games this year. Tyler Badgett, right? I don't know. I don't know that he's actually any good. I don't know that I want to trade picks for a backup from another team. William says, trade him if we can't cut him. Rip the bandage off. You talk about Debo, I assume. Yeah, listen, I'm with it. And don't do a spread it out over 2 years deal either. Like, just rip the band-aid off and have all the money you can have free in 2026. VO says, Jesse, what's good, my man? Hey, what's up, VO? He says they need to cut Debo and sign Rondale Moore from Atlanta. Give him a 1-year deal. God bless. Yeah. If they move on from Debo, I see where your head's at. At the same time, don't replace Debo with Timu Debo. Like, just get a legit wide receiver that can run routes and be good. Like, you don't have to go get Debo light. And then he says we should bring Matthew Wright back. He was good. Yeah. Actually, a couple of those kickers that we had this year ended up being pretty good. So I don't know. Just yeah, man, don't get Timo Debo, man. Don't do it. There's no point. But that's, I mean, tell me I'm lying, 187, right? Like, he can't just take a discount to take a discount. He's got to ask for, I mean, that's the way the league works. That's the way the players union works. So no, I mean, he's got to do it. I mean, who cares? We should care because it's just like, can the 49ers win a Super Bowl going forward? Like, nothing else matters to us as fans. Nothing else matters to ownership. They want to sell tickets. That's why you pay Brock Purdy, because people love Brock Purdy. You pay him. To Brock Purdy and what he owes to the players union, he's got to ask for all the money. Plus, he's been criminally underpaid. That's why Brock. But for us as fans, we should care. We should, just like Dolphins fans and Jaguars fans and Cowboys fans, all should have cared when they paid those guys. And you're going, if every other fan base, remember when those guys got paid? Just remember what you thought when those guys got paid. When the Tua contract came across timeline, you're like, that was stupid, but whatever. Not my team. Go do your thing, Miami. Dak Prescott, $60 million, 5-year. But whoa. All right. Well, Dallas gonna Dallas, right? Remember what you thought when those contracts came across your timeline. You're like, well, not my team. I don't really care that much, but geez, they're in purgatory. That's why we should care. Now, it's not ultimately going to make like the biggest difference in the world. The contract's going to be the contract, but we should absolutely care about it. For sure, we should care about it. For sure, we should care about it. Yeah, but again, this is like the whole real estate thing, or when car prices went up. Like, yes, they go up, but that doesn't mean you have to be a buyer. See what I'm saying? Like, you don't have to buy. You don't have to buy. Anyways, that's it. I have got to go because I've got a family obligation and we're supposed to leave here in a minute. So Sexy Potato Dancer is making sure, though, that they get their super chat in. This is a great name. Anders Carlson was better and cheaper than Moody. Lyle. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, oh, dude, speaking of Ed Reed, check this out. Got my son, who's a Ravens fan, an Ed Reed signed helmet. He wrote Hall of Fame on it. Everything, dude. It's so sick. It's like the alternate light purple helmet too. It's so clean. Anyways, he got that for Christmas. You're talking Ed Reed. I'd love to have Ed Reed, but just reminded me of that. That being said, I'm going to head out. I'm going to go spend some time with the family. I hope you all have a fantastic weekend. The 49ers don't play till Monday, so I'll probably be back on Monday. It had just been over a week since I had streamed because I was in the Dominican Republic and came back, and it was Christmas and what have you. So I wanted to get out here and chat with everybody, see how y'all are doing. I did tease some personal news, so I'll give that to you. It looks like starting in January, I will be streaming Thursdays and Fridays on Bleacher Report. So I thought that was pretty cool. I know me personally, I've had Bleacher Report as an app on my phone for years. They're like a staple app that must have for avid sports fans. And they reached out and want to bring me on to make content for them twice a week. And so I'm going to do it. I think it'll be a lot of fun. So Thursdays and Fridays, 6 p.m. Pacific, starting in a couple weeks, I'll be on Bleacher Report. That was kind of the big personal news as far as like streaming goes as well. So looking forward to that. And that's going to do it. Appreciate y'all. Enjoy your loved ones. Have a blessed weekend, and I will be back soon. Peace.